forgot to record. By the way, you guys are supposed to remind me to record, so don't forget to remind me. All right. So this is, I went over the checklist last night and I tried to get everything, but I know that there's a few things that I missed. And one of the things that got messed up was the lab check-in. So I wanted everybody to check in to the open lab and come in. And I don't think everybody did, but I lost track of who did and who didn't. So I just gave everybody credit for it, right? So if you didn't, we'll go by the honor system. If you didn't check in, try to check in this week. Okay, so the open lab is being pushed back a day because I had to get my shot last week and it pushed everything into this week, and that's why we're doing the meeting today instead of yesterday. So I apologize. I hope I didn't screw up anybody's schedule, but it's the class is supposed to be asynchronous anyway. So, I mean, the school actually tells me, you know, don't have a set time, you know, move your meetings around to like fit your student schedule. But when I leave it up to the students to figure out when we should meet, it gets crazy. So I kind of like having to do it a certain time every week. We get in a schedule, and so after this week, we'll be in a rhythm, and we'll meet on Mondays at 10 o'clock every Monday until the end of the semester, except for spring break. Okay, so also on the checklist, one thing is that if you missed any of the items on the checklist because you couldn't get it, or like, you know, if you couldn't figure out the Google Hangout, or for whatever reason, if you couldn't get the whole checklist done, then come to lab tonight, and anything that's outstanding, you know, on your checklist, we can figure it out, and if we need to, we can go step by step, and that way everybody's up to speed starting this week. Okay, so that's that. So what I'd rather do is, instead of like 20 emails about like, oh, I couldn't set up my Hangout, or I couldn't figure out how to put my picture in the drive, save those emails and just come to lab either tonight or tomorrow morning, and we'll figure that out. Okay. Okay. All right, so I want to go over the reading a little bit. And the reading, I was really like kind of struck by your comments, and it was really interesting what you guys picked out, you know, to talk about. The I'm going to open up the reader, and so we can take a look at it. I'm not going to go over the whole chapter page by page, blow by blow, but there's a couple things that I want to talk about as it relates to this semester. And so I think that'll take maybe like 15 or 20 minutes, and then we will just get started in project one. Okay. So the layout today is basically, let's go over the reading, any concerns you have about the semester in general, and then I'll go over the rules and criteria of project one, and then I want to do something I call a music exercise, or a sound exercise. It's not really music. And what I do is I play several different tracks, and some of it's music or borderline music, and some of it's just sound, and some of it's music. And for each track, I want you to translate that into 2D, right? So in other words, if it's like, you know, if we're listening to like new age, minimal, very light sort of background, sort of like at the spa sort of music, that's going to have a very different aesthetic than if we're listening to like Slayer or like death metal, right? That's going to be like really super aggressive. There's probably going to be sharp things, you know, there's probably things threatening other things. And so the textures are going to be different from track to track. So I'll talk more about that later as we get to it. But let's first take a look at the reading. I'm going to share the screen and just go down the reader. Somebody, I don't know if it was this class, maybe it was the Pasadena class, said that something was edited out of the version that I put online. So I want to go through and look at that and see if we can straighten that out. Share screen. And I'm going to share my desktop so you can see the whole thing. And we are here. And then we're going to go to Citrus. Okay, so my connection's slow because the whole household is on Zoom right now. My kid's on Zoom, so it looks like it's going to slow things up a little or a lot. Wow, okay, there. Checklist. And we want to go to the reading. And we're going to click here to read. And then let's make it a full page. Okay, so while this loads up, it does, oh there, finally. Okay. And then we're starting on page 35. Great, okay. Can you all see that? All right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so chapter 2, the reason I assigned it sort of at the beginning of the semester is that I particularly like how it it hits on several different types of disciplines. And okay, I have to do something about my cat really quick. Sorry. Get out of here. Okay, sorry about that. It tackles several different kinds of disciplines. And if you kind of look through it, it's interesting that, you know, there's everybody is had almost a completely different part of chapter 2 that they were interested in. So as I was reading your responses, I was like, wow, everybody's interest is sort of on a different thing. And then I thought, well, maybe they saw each other's responses and didn't want to duplicate it. So I haven't figured that part out yet. But the fact that you guys all picked kind of different focuses really sort of works in the beginning, because when I start to grade project 1, all sorts of, you know, I can tell 100 people, 1,000 people, I can give them the same project, you know, do a white on white design in a 1 foot by 1 foot square. And, you know, you would think that everybody would do something similar, but it's crazy. Everybody fingerprint, you know, hand, everybody's touch, everybody's sort of like personality just filters through. So in a sense, you don't really even have to like try to do something like different and designy or, you know, bold or anything. Just let your natural hand sort of dictate your work. And I feel like you'll come up with something a little more natural and a little more dynamic um, than if you try to like construct this thing piece by piece very accurately. Okay, so let's just go through some of these things. Uh, One of the things that I was surprised that no one talked about was, I mean, a couple of you talked about biomimicry, and biomimicry is basically art and design that mimics biology, or it mimics nature, right? A lot of times it mimics a human. And I was surprised that no one went down, um, I don't know if, let's see how far down it is. The, the, uh, the Choeka machine. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? The Choeka machine is this machine where, oh, we're getting close, I think. There. All right. Do you guys know what this machine does?
Digestive system mimics the digestive
That's
system.
exactly right. So you put food here, and then it goes through the human digestive system, and then it craps it out at the end, just like a human, right? All right. So why would anybody do this? Why? Why would anybody make such a thing? Um, do you think that this is? Let's play the art or a design game. So, is this? Would you consider this art, or would you consider this design, um, or is it both? Or if it's both, does it lean to one side or another?
It seems like it's more design than anything.
Okay. Um, let's see what you guys are typing here in the chat. All right, so Melissa says design. Okay. Well, there is definitely an element of design, right? You know, this the designer put this up in a row. It's definitely thought about in terms of aesthetics. Okay. All right. So is this design for mass production, or is this um, is this object trying to communicate something?
Perhaps it's trying to communicate the inner workings of how our digestive system actually works, because some people don't know how it actually works, you know.
Okay, so then that's an angle that I didn't think about, right? So maybe this is like a science project, right? Where it's trying to instruct you in some way. So in other words, it's trying to communicate science or information, right? That's interesting because I've never thought about it that way. I've always thought about this as a sculpture, as a piece of art, right? And because, you know, art will actually, if you think of a line and you think on one side, you're trying to sell stuff to the masses, right? And then on the other side, you're trying to communicate emotion, right? So there's overlap because you have to design all of it, right? But what is it for? So I've always looked at this and thought, this is sculpture, this is art, this is biomimicry, right? But if you're saying that it's to communicate a certain scientific knowledge, then that makes sense almost as design because schools could consume this, right? It would be meant for like mass consumption. Every school could have some version of this, right? And then it does, you're absolutely right. It could absolutely fall in the design category. Okay, this is a fun game, so let's keep going. Wow, it's fun for me. I don't know. All right. These, when we start the project, I'll talk about minimalism. I'll talk about working in a reductive way. There's an art term that you just need to pick up right now and carry with you forever. Working in a reductive way. So what does that mean exactly? You take out anything extra, right? You take out anything that doesn't need to be there to say what you're going to say. All right. So this happens across all sorts of disciplines, right? Happens across writing, furniture design, food. It happens across just about every sort of form of creation, right? When you reduce it down to the main point. So I can't remember if I talked about it last week, but for example, Ernest Hemingway, right? He basically this was his whole thing. He would reduce the words down to the simplest ones, right? So his idea of using ordinary language to describe extraordinary things um, is a strategy kind of reduction, right? You want to reduce the words down just to the bare minimum. And so this happens in art and it happens in design all the time, right? Okay, so we're looking at Donald Judd's, was there a title? There's no title. Plywood units, right? Okay, so if you look at these, you immediately think, oh, these are very utilitarian. It's like bookshelves, right? And then you look and you're like, well, this doesn't make any utilitarian sense, right? It doesn't make sense that that's like that. And it doesn't move. It's just stuck there. And if you look in here, that doesn't really make sense either. Why would you have a fold in there where you couldn't reach it? It blocks off space. And so all of a sudden, these very, very standard utilitarian things kind of take a turn over into the art world, right? They start to cross the line into some other things. You can still use it as a bookcase, half of it, but then in the other part, it's like, what do you put in there, right? Stuff you want to hide. Okay, so there's that. Octopus sushi just happens to be my favorite, so I don't know why it's in there. It's coincidence. I want to show you one more thing about the reading, and then actually a couple things. I'm looking for that crazy. Oh, here, we can talk about this for a moment. All right. So as you get used to design and you start to build things and you make things and you learn how to use baling wire and you learn how to cut foam and you get all these processes under your belt, it doesn't come right away, but after a few years or maybe towards the end of your degree, you start getting a confidence, or you should start getting a confidence. Some of you probably have it already, this confidence, whether it's earned or not, but it's good to have. And this confidence, I'll give you an example. So my wife was watching Project Runway, and over and over, right? It was just one of the shows that she would watch. And I would just be on my iPad doing some other thing. And, but out of like the corner of my eye, it started to catch my attention. And then I just started to just watch it, right? And I don't know why I was embarrassed about it, but, then I was just started watching it with my wife. And as somebody that considers himself a designer, I was looking, I've never, I don't know, even know how to work a sewing machine, but I was like, you know what? I could totally, totally make a better dress than that guy on Project Runway. I'm 100% sure, right? And I've never made a dress. I know I could make one. And that's the confidence you get as you start learning processes and learning about how your tastes and sense of design matches up with the rest of the world. So you kind of put yourself and you can sort of um almost put yourself in a certain niche and then compare yourself with other designers in that realm. I do it all the time. Okay, so that's one thing. But oh, here it is. All right. So I want you to look at this gate, and somewhere in here, I feel like there's the answer to this question of whether something's art or design. All right. So I'm looking at this gate, and um, first of all, do you think that, okay, let me just ask you, is this art or is this design?
I see art.
Perhaps a
Both?
little bit.
Say that again, Aaron.
I was going to say perhaps it's a little bit of both of art and design. It seems like it's a continuous line piece within this fence.
Definitely. Okay. It's a little bit of both, of course, right? But does it lean one way or the other?
I believe it leans more toward the art aspect. Like I said, it seems more like a continuous line piece. And throughout this whole fence, there's a lot of different like lines in terms of like straight to curving to parallel. So just a whole bunch of different things going on.
Okay, I agree with this, right? So if you okay, and Mariana says it's more like design. Okay, so let's talk about this because it's important in this class, and then um, how you sort of approach design and how you see design. Okay, so do you think you could mass produce these? In other words, could you make these with the realistic expectation that there'll be a group of consumers that would buy this? Okay, Mariana says yes. So Mariana says yes. Julie is
Yes, you know.
no.
Yeah, I have to agree with Julie. I don't believe there would be a big market for that.
All right. But there might be a small market, right? Okay. So that's where I think we're leaning into the art world. All right. So if your gate like this and you're trying to say something personal, in other words, you're trying to express something, that leans more into the emotional side than the functional side, right? So I feel like this is very, very much somebody trying to express something, right? It is very much not a gate that would keep your cat in, right? It's not completely functional in that it couldn't keep even a human in or out, right? Well, it'd have to be a small human to get through there, but you could. Okay, so in a big way, it's not functional as a gate, right? This is more about an artist trying to tell you something that he's crazy or he's he's very non-standard. He's an organic thinker set with doing something that's not organic, right? So if you think about this as kind of splitting the difference between like art and design, then I think we're getting pretty close to what I want you to think about for your project. All right. Okay. So let's stop the reading part there. Let me see if there's anything else. The golden mean, that's something you should just know in design. You should just figure it out what it is. Sometimes I'll just go back and review it because it's almost inspiring in a weird way. Okay, modernism and postmodernism. Do we want to talk about that? Okay, let me briefly describe. I can do this in 3 minutes, okay? So, so modernism, if you think about modernism, you could just immediately go to somebody like Picasso, right? Where it's abstract, it's very abstract, right? But there's still a figure in there. There's still a narrative in there, right? And it's all contained in the picture frame. All right. So skip ahead to Jackson Pollock, and there's it's called abstract expressionism, but that's a misnomer because there's nothing that's been abstracted, right, visually. So abstract expressionism is how he's expressing it. How he's expressing it is abstract from normal expressions, right? So if you look at a Jackson Pollock, there's no figure in there, right? And the work becomes about the material, right? Like how it drips, how it dries, about the artist, right? Was the artist like drunk? And Pollock was always drunk, right? So was he drunk? Was he in a rage? You know, the dots on the paint got smaller, right? As the madder he was, the finer the paint would mist and speckle, right? So so that means the meaning went outside of the picture frame, right? And that's the difference between modernism, where everything's there in the picture frame, and postmodernism, where it's gone, it's away from the picture frame. So, and it's also a difference between abstraction, Picasso's abstract, and non-figurative, right? Jackson Pollock is non-figurative. Picasso is definitely figurative. Okay, so your project one, the way this relates is that your project has to be non-figurative. Okay, so that's all I want to say about postmodernism. The danger with me talking about postmodernism is that I can go on. I could do a whole class on postmodernism versus modernism, and I'm so into it because it was like a thing I conquered. Like it was something enigmatic, and I was afraid of it when I was going into graduate school. And then in graduate school, I figured it out. I feel like I figured it out, and then it became something I was really, really interested in and kind of support. I don't support modernism or postmodernism, but I support this idea that there's a difference, right? Okay. So let's get into project one. And what I want for this, why don't we go over the examples first so you can get a general idea of what I want. And I'm sure, I don't know if you guys have taken a look at it already. Have you guys looked at the examples for project one?
Yeah, I started going over them.
Okay, let's just briefly go through them, and then that way everybody's kind of on the same page. All right, share screen again, and Firefox course reading. Yeah, let's do that. Oh, wait a minute. No, that was okay. I don't want to do that. Sorry. I want to go back to the desktop. squash this thing. Uh-oh, scared me. Let's see, we were going to, okay, so my advice is when you get lost, oh, it's so slow. Okay, example projects with grades. There we are. Okay, can you guys see that? Yes, okay. So when I ask if you guys can see it, the only actually moving pictures I have right now are Julie and Melissa. So be sure to respond so I can tell what's happening. Okay, so this project, this is, it's one of my favorite projects just because it's so simple and it was so clean. And this idea of volume made it through, right? So this is a very, if you look at it, it's a very, very volumetric piece, right? These pieces are very volumetric. This is very volumetric, right? And it works in contrast with these pieces that are in repetition, but these are flat. These are one layer, and this is 6 layers, right? And they're beautifully cut. So, you know, the subtext is, if you just listen to me, I was talking a lot about, I was kind of talking about craftsmanship, right? So it was the first thing I noticed about this piece. The second thing I noticed was volume. So if you're making a list of things, write in craftsmanship, write in volume, and then the third thing is contrast, right? There's several different contrasts that I want you to consider. You don't have to incorporate all of them, but I want you to consider small pieces and big pieces, and busy spaces and open spaces, right? You know, we talked about flat versus volumetric, and curved and straight. That contrast is really, can really visually work. Look at this part right here. It's so simple. There's repetition of straight pieces, and this beautiful arc just goes over. And one of the things about 3D that we keep an eye on, because we're 3D, is shadow. Look at the shadows that this thing makes, right? And when you get more volumetric pieces, the shadows become very dramatic, right? They go from pretty dark to very light. And this is, you can recreate this in 2D, but there's nothing like creating actual shadow in 3D. Okay. All right, so I gave that one an A. That one's nice. This one's an A- because I like the attempt at balance, right? But there's, if you look, there's some dings in there. And in real life, there was fingerprints, and it's an okay design. I mean, it's a good design, but I think this is a nicer design. And there's all these like little dings, and then I could see that the edges were sanded. So what I'd like is a little bit cleaner. This is a B plus. This is a B plus because I like the texture and I like the approach. And I might have actually given this A-, I can't remember. But if I take a line and I draw a line from here straight down the middle, the left is pretty much the same as the right. In other words, this thing gets a little too symmetrical. And what I'm looking for is asymmetry, right? This is asymmetry, this is asymmetry. Okay, so now I've told you like 4 things: craftsmanship, volume, contrast, asymmetry, right? We already know that it's non-figurative. That's 5 things, okay, to remember. All right. This is a B. Why do you think I gave this a B? Any guesses?
Which, was it the third B? Are you talking about?
This one.
Oh, the second B.
Yeah.
Is it too figurative?
Yep. What's the figure though?
Is it maybe the center, the circles look like glasses almost. They look like eyes popping out.
Yeah, there's goggles there, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely. I
Goggles
saw
with-
it right. I saw it right away.
It looks like crazy eyes in the middle that are like in a, you know, like a Roger Rabbit character or something.
Yeah, it's like googly eyes in. So, and then once that's in your head, it's ruined. It's basically that's you know, I can't get it out of my head. Still, if I look at this just in terms of like design and balance, you know, it's not bad. It's not a bad design. It does need more volume, right? It needs more volume. This one's sort of tricky because it does have volume. These are all different heights, right? So this one's 6 layers high, but it's subtle, and it goes from 6 to 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 to 0. And so there is this volume in there, which is really nice. Okay. And then this is very volumetric to balance all the circles and lines out here. And this is very volumetric to balance out all the repetition and the contrast over here. So this one has this kind of a sense of balance. You could actually argue that this is heavy towards this corner. This has its, you can see them working on balance, right? Like, okay, how am I going to make this visually heavy enough to balance this side? This one, it's too balanced. I mean, it's too symmetrical. So what I'm looking for is asymmetry, but balance. Okay, that's like 6 things I've told you. All right, so this is a B minus. Or I'll just tell you, same sort of thing. I don't know what this is, but it's a thing squirting water, right? And it's a figure. It's some figure squirting water, and there's almost no volume, right? This is just 1, 2 layers. This is 2 layers. And that's as high as it went. Okay, so this is 6 layers. This is 6 layers. This is actually 6 layers, I think, and I'm not sure. And this was, you know, maybe 4 or 5, and this was 2. All right, so this just didn't. It was figurative and no volume. And if you look close, it was kind of dinged up a little bit. So that's why it got a B minus. Not a horrible design, but all it took is, you know, basically turning this one in a different direction so that it wasn't squirting water, and then adding volume, and then it would have been fine. Okay, so this one I gave a C. Don't even look at this one yet. All right, so this one I gave a C, and why do you think I gave this a C? By the way, this is that in there. It's cut all the way through to the wall, if you can't tell. So if you put this on a brown table, this would be, you would see the brown table right in here.
It seems like the waves are too symmetrical. Like there's a lot of repetition.
Absolutely. Now the repetition's fine, but the fact that I could draw a line diagonally, and for the most, I mean, this is different than that, but for about 60% of the project, it's too symmetrical, right? If I draw a line from here to here, and this is all become symmetrical, and This is, let me tell you how these holes came about. All right. So in a, in all my classes, I will always, you know, think about it. I'm an artist. I come from an art background. Both my parents are artists. I was nearly born in an art school. So I have a natural tendency to favor artists, right? Like art. Okay. But think about this. I'm a design teacher. I get paid. I get paid to teach design and to teach it properly. All right. So what does that mean for you? What that means is I'll always encourage you to take risks. I always want you to take risks, right? All right. Now I'm going to tell you, as a design teacher, don't take any risks because I will drop your grade. Got it? Okay. And I'm just going to leave you with that, right? Don't take risks because I'll drop your grade, but take risks because that's how good art comes. That's how great art comes. All right. And I'm just going to leave you with that. Here's an example. It wasn't that one. We're not looking at that bottom one yet. All right. So I told you about, I don't know if I mentioned this in lab or I mentioned this to you or I mentioned this to another class, but one of my favorite projects was this guy that like put his foam board into a blender and with water or glue and blended it up into this mush, right? This is for this project. Okay. Put it in a blender, blended it up, made this paste that he put on his board, right? And he didn't really break any rule. Like I didn't tell him he couldn't do that, right? I just told him that like, okay, it needs to be 1 foot by 1 foot. It can't be taller than 1.5 inches, right? And so anyway, he turned in this project and it looked like hell. It was so awful looking because it bent it bent the board and he didn't really do a good job with the design. Okay. And I maybe gave him a B minus or a C plus. I can't remember. I think a B minus. But it's one of my favorite projects ever made in 20 years. And it's one of my favorites because he was like, I'm going to subvert this whole thing and do it my own way, right? Okay, as an artist, that's all I can hope for, right? That's my guy, right? Somebody that does it that way. As a design teacher, I can't let that happen. I just can't. Okay, so here's the thing. Sometimes people will take a risk and incorporate good design, and that's your quickest way to what I consider an A plus, right? You took a risk, you added good design, and it transcended the project. You came up with like an Uber project, all right? So that it doesn't happen that much, and I maybe have a couple examples, but I'll show them to you after you start because I don't want to incept anything into your head before you start. I want this to be your own project. Okay, so this one, this wasn't my class. This was a colleague of mine did this project and just sent this to me, and it's the gold standard of kind of like what not to do, right? And so I'm kidding about the F minus. I would never give anybody an F minus, right? That's a joke. But I would give you an A plus. That's for real. And but I would the biggest insult for me to give you as a grade is a D, right? That would be the biggest insult. So this really should say a D. What that implies is that you tried and you made something so awful that, you know, I could easily give this an F as a failure, but F almost implies that you didn't even try. In other words, you just didn't even turn in the assignment. So a D is you actually tried, and this is what you came up with, right? Okay, so what's wrong with this? Craftsmanship, right? Okay, this project is about volume. So the only way worse is just to add nothing at all, right? Which in this case, I would have preferred, because another thing that you can remember is, like, I don't want you guys to accidentally make, I don't want you to accidentally make an icon or a logo, right? That distracts from your composition. And this person, to me, that's a Nike stripe or a Nike swoosh. And so the one thing he puts on there is a logo, right? You couldn't mess this up any more than he messed this up. All right, so I wanted to show you that. Okay, so while we're on here, I'm trying to remember if I did what I did last week. I need to write this stuff down. Okay, I'm gonna stop the share, and oh, more people are here. That's great. I'm gonna stop the share, and then okay, this is what I would like to do now. I would like to take a 10-minute break, and I need to go get coffee and then rest my voice a little bit. And let's come back at 11, and then we'll start in. I'll show you some of the contrasts that I want for the project, and then we'll do the sound exercise, and then that'll be it for today. Okay? Okay, so let's come back at 11. All right, before I start in again, we're all from Citrus College, correct?
That is correct.
I feel like there's PCC people here, which is interesting. Okay, I have to think about that some other time. I don't know what's happening. I guess it's the same class, so I guess it doesn't matter. All right. So before we go on, I wanted to ask you, well, do you have any questions so far? Is there anything vague about the class or how I run it or how the grade's gonna happen? Is there any question about the projects, anything up to this point, or we're all good?
I have a question about the 3D project. Like, do we put another foam board on top of a foam board to make an object?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, right. And so well, let's talk about that part right now. So your projects, kind of like the ones that I just showed you, the foam board examples.
Yes.
If you think about this project, the title of it, it's all the projects have some version of volume, right? Some version of mass. So the first project, it's all about volume, like in terms of just design elements, right? We're concerned about volume. Um, Later on, we talk about narrative and balance and that kind of stuff. But the primary aspect of this project, and when they design the curriculum, they say, okay, Adam, what is your project that you do that concerns volume, right? And I say, I do the lower leaf project. Okay, so this project has to do with volume and maximizing volume. Now, it starts as a 2D project. I'm having you sort of sketch out ideas in 2D, and then we're going to grow them into a 3D project. Okay. Now, there's a limit. You can only go 1.5 inches high, right? That turns out to be about 7 layers of foam board. So the maximum you can do, including the maximum you can do, including the base piece, is 7 layers, right? All right. So the idea of this is to like show. So in other words, you could stack 7 layers and be like, okay, here's my 7 layers of volume, right? Just like you said. And then you just have like a stack of foam board 7 layers thick that's 1 foot by 1 foot by 1.5 inches. And you will have maxed out the volume. But then you've disregarded any of the compositional elements, right? You've basically just maxed out the whole thing. So we do want to consider formal criteria of design, right? We want to think about asymmetry. We want to think about the contrasts, right? So, for example, I have, let's see my stack of Post-its? All right. So if I have one Post-it, that's pretty much, it's one single plane. It's pretty much 2D, right? There's not a third dimension. But if I stack a whole bunch of them, that creates volume. That's what we're looking for in this project, is volume in contrast with other pieces that are flat. So your project should have thick pieces, chunky, blocky pieces. They don't have to be square, right? They could be round. And flat pieces, right? And maybe a couple that are 2 layers or 4 layers or 5 layers, right? But the most dramatic contrasts are like thick right next to thin. Okay, okay. So that's the first time I ever used Post-its for that. So actually it's not bad.
Professor,
Yes.
do you by any chance have any demos on this
Mm.
anywhere?
I do in a couple different ways. So I thought, I think I have a, if I haven't posted it already, I have a foam board cutting demo, right? And I will show you step by step how to cut foam board. And if you're having trouble, I'll have you come to Open Lab, and we'll just, me and you, we'll just cut foam until you get it correct. Okay, so it's a very critical part of the project. But the technical part, the process part, you can start anytime, but I'm not going to start on it until next week. So I want you guys this week to think about your design, to think about composition, to think about how to get started, right? There's some strategies. So we'll talk about strategies in getting started, like what we should have looked at maybe in the book. Maybe we can go back to it. But, you know, are you a mathematical person? Maybe you make a grid and you come up with a mathematical equation for each grid, right? And then do something. And then maybe for contrast, you put in over the top, you put in something that's like less grid oriented and more organic. And so there's different strategies that we'll get to. Okay, so let me go back to the whiteboard again, and just so I can show you a couple of the contrasts that I'm talking about. Did that answer your question? Okay, now I forgot the question. All right, let's see. Okay, whiteboard. Whiteboard. All right, so in this draw thing, I think I can make a box. Yes. Okay. And then I think I can freehand in here. All right, so, oh wait, text even. All right. So we're going to talk about the contrasts that make a dynamic design. All right. So when remember we were talking about Malevich and his dot in the square, right? And putting it in the most dynamic place. Okay. So I could easily assign this project and say, okay, I want you to make the most static, boring design possible. And you could do a good version of boring, right? You put it in the middle, you make it symmetrical. There's nothing interesting about it. It just sort of like dies in the middle, right? And, you know, think about, here's an example of like dynamic versus not dynamic. Years ago, I flew into LAX, and the cab driver at the time was, and I'm not like shaming him or anything, but he was just the biggest person I've ever seen. And so I'm sitting in the back, and I'm just trying to figure out how he got into the car at all, right? And then I started to think maybe he doesn't get in or out. Maybe he's just always in there. And so I asked him, I was like, hey, I live in Santa Monica. You know, are we taking the 405? And he's like, he doesn't turn his head, doesn't move his eyes away. He's just like, yeah, like one grunt for yes. I couldn't believe. Okay, so I bring this up because in human form, that was the most static person I've ever seen. Like, he didn't move. He wasn't animated. He was interesting, very interesting in a certain way, but he was not dynamic, right? Okay, so years after that, I was watching the Olympics and they were having, I forget what it's called, but it's like an Olympic trial sport, but it's like a gymnastic thing where they have a ball and they have a ball or they have like a stick with a ribbon on it, you know, and they do a floor exercise and they have this ball and um, there's stuff flying around and rolling around and you know, twirling around. And I looked at that and I was like, that's the most dynamic person I've ever seen. More energy, defying gravity, you know, there was all sorts of movement. It was really like asymmetrical. It was like all over the place, you know. And so that was like kind of the perfect embodiment of dynamic. And so you don't have to like you don't have to make anything that dynamic, that, you know, exciting. But what I don't want you to do is static, right? I don't want, oh, let's see. You don't want something just there, just stuck in the middle, okay? All right, because that's just the most expected thing. And you know what people kind of like, you know, they might make a thing like this, and a thing like this, and then a thing like this, thing like this, and then a block here, and then a block here. All right, so if this is the case, they've just made something too symmetrical, right? You can divide it this way. Can I divide it that way? Let's see. If you divide it this way, it's kind of the same up here as it is down here. I mean, I drew that crooked, so it's a little different. All right. You can divide it this way. And it's the same over here. Actually, that looks like a basketball court. Oh, that's funny. All right. So let's see. Now, might as well draw the rim. So if you think about it, a basketball court is very symmetrical, right? That's too symmetrical. I don't want you to make a basketball court. Okay, that's a mistake that you can make. Here's another mistake. You're designing, you're making lines, and then you're making lines, and then you know it's up here, and then you're here's another line, and then over here. Okay, so I was just crossing lines, minding my own business, and look, I made the Holy Cross on accident, right? All right. Now, you might say, oh, you know what? I'm Christian, so I'm going to leave it. And that would be a design mistake, right? So essentially, what you're doing is you're creating an icon that distracts from all the work that you did, right? So in other words, it doesn't matter if you're Christian or not Christian, you'll look at this and it's an icon and it will attract your attention. Okay, so what you want to do is avoid things that are icons. And so, for example, you know, people see this in all sorts of different ways. You know, some people say, oh, okay, sign of Christianity, it's a sign of faith, it's a sign, you know, something positive. And then the other half of the world will look at this and say, that's clearly an instrument of torture, right? And so you're basically going into a conversation, you're getting out of your lane in terms of design, right? So you just want to like make sure, here's another example. Okay, this is unbelievable bad design. All right, so in Virginia. No, it's in San Diego. So basically, somebody was commissioned to make a barracks for the military. I think it's Air Force, if I'm not mistaken. And so an American, I think, contractor or architect was like, I'm going to make this building. I'm going to make this building and it's going to have like these open areas, and then, but these open areas, I think I'm going to make these wings that block off this area, right? So. I'm gonna there. Okay, so he made this building that looks like this. And they built it. It's in San Diego. If you Google like Nazi building, San Diego, you'll see it, right? It's insane. Now, so there's a big conspiracy about this, right? Like whether that's so obvious that maybe the architect was trying to say something. I don't know. There's conspiracy theories about it, right? Okay, clearly this is a design mistake, right? You don't want to make a building that says you're a Nazi. That would seem like, I feel like that would be the first rule in design. Just don't be a Nazi, So think about this just in terms of design. Like forget the Nazi part. It's not bad, right? This is not a bad design because it has a wing of barracks, right? A hallway, and the barracks themselves close off, like they barricade these big yards. It's not bad. It's sort of nice, right? It's protected from the wind. It's very communal in a way. And, you can kind of like, you can see your other neighbors, but it's not like the buildings are right on each other. So there's something kind of interesting about it, but you would never guess that. You would never know that because everybody thinks you're a Nazi. All right. So that's something you could consider. So one time at, it wasn't at Citrus, but at Pasadena, I basically drew this on the board. And, and then the dean came in and was like, why is that there? All right. Okay, so those are kind of things to think about right away. Here's another thing. If you you don't want anything right in the middle, one thing is you don't want stuff in the corner, especially round things. Because what does that make?
A planet.
Sun.
Yep, planet, sun, moon. That's what it makes. If you put a round thing in the corner, it's going to make a planet, right? Even if you...
Professor,
Yes.
in the A project you showed, wasn't there like kind of an arch in the corner though? I know there was like cubes within the arch, so does that make it okay if you have like a shape within an arch that's in a corner?
Yeah, okay, that's a really good point. So the arc was kind of like here, right? It was kind of like in this position. That's enough space away from the corner, right? That you're not actually bearing down into the corner. So in other words, if that thought, if you put it right here, then that becomes an issue, more of an issue, right? Because it's sort of like you're starting to like get to a point where you're clearly acknowledging the corner. All right. So this part is okay. And, but your point is well taken because, you know, there's squares that happen in this corner. And when I said that, oh, you know, you could argue that it makes this corner or this section heavy, that would be a fair argument, right? You have all this volume and it's kind of heavy into this corner. And the idea was to balance it with like these dramatic shadows and repetition on the other side. Okay, so it's a good point. I think if this started to become that's when you start to have an issue. But that's a really good point. Okay. Oh God. I think there's like a demographic of people that they know that I'm working. They know that I'm in class right now, and that's when they wait to call me. It makes me insane. All right, so let's talk about the contrast really fast, and then we'll do the sound exercise. So the contrast. Let's see. Am I going to type them somewhere? Why not? Let's see. Let me type them here. I think I can here. All right. You should write these down. Big, small, busy, open, flat, volume, curved, straight, organic, geo, and text. All right, so in your project, you should have at least most of these incorporated into your project. So in other words, you want to have like big pieces, and you know, if you have we're not even talking volumetric yet, right? And then you have, let's see, can I do little circles? All right. So if you have a contrast, now they don't have to be right next to each other. They just have to be in the 1 foot square somewhere. You might say that this one big piece, maybe it does have volume, visually balances this piece, right? So we're talking about using contrast. These are the contrasts to make a balanced composition. Okay. So that's let's see. Should I do another page? Yeah, let's type in. This is big, small. All right. Do another page. And okay, let's make this one busy. Open. All right. So if we're talking about different cultures and you know, people that it's very interesting. So when I get students that are from like Hong Kong or Tokyo or you know, Bangladesh, or like these high density population, high density, like very like New York City, when you give them a 1 foot by 1 foot space, their tendency is just to leave stuff open. What they want is space to breathe and to think, right? Okay, when you give the same 1 foot square to somebody from like Texas, like West Texas, uh, they'll start, you know, bigger is better. They'll start putting all kinds of information in there, right? All kinds of stuff, all kinds of they'll the very Western idea of like filling the picture plane, fill the picture plane with all kinds of stuff. More is better, right? So that's a very like kind of Western idea. What I want you to do, okay, little parable, right? So if you've ever been to Lincoln, like Santa Monica, and driven down Lincoln, down to Venice, and then Mar Vista or whatever the other place is, on Lincoln, I haven't been there in a long time, so I don't remember. But on Lincoln, it's just an assault, a visual assault of billboards, bright lights, brightly colored buildings, advertisements, posters, signs, right? And they're all vying for your attention, right? They're all vying for your money, right? They're all vying for your attention so that you spend money on them, right? So um, it got to be so noisy visually that I would, you know, I just didn't even, it was just an energy drain just driving through there, being like sucked in from all these different directions. Okay, this is 20 years ago or longer. And there was one company that decided, you know, some very, very clever designer for this particular company decided that you need a break visually. All right, let me ask you, any guesses on what that company was? That created a billboard to give you a break visually?
Kit Kat?
Wrong. I didn't think about it that way. Yeah, that's right in a different way. Okay. No, Apple, right? Apple decided that they're going to put like a very, they're going to put a very faint logo right in the middle. And this is all white. It's all white. This is very light gray. So you barely noticed it. So when you're driving down, all these billboards and all these signs are trying to vie for your attention. And Apple, they gave you a visual break. It's an all white board. It was easy to look at. And it ended up drawing more attention just by giving the viewer a visual break. All right. And then other companies did it later on. But Apple was the first one. And Apple's the first one in a lot of things in terms of design. So I go back to them. Okay, so busy open is, you know, if you have oops. Okay, I think you can agree that's pretty busy over there, right? So if you just continued all this all the way across, that would be a pretty busy composition. And I would tell you, you know what? You need to like, you need to open up space, right? So if you have a little space in here, that's a nice contrast between busy and then open, right? So you want to have both because they both play in each other. So if you just was like, well, I'm just going to leave it wide open, that's just what that's my aesthetic, right? that's too much space open. That's too much. Then it becomes unbalanced, right? You want to have like something that starts to balance out these minimal things. Okay, here's the rule about being minimal. The more minimal that you are, this is across the board. This counts for everything. The more minimal you are, the cleaner it has to be. You can't have any craftsmanship errors, the more minimal it gets. Because when people start to micro focus on your work and you only have one little piece here and there, quality becomes more and more important. The craftsmanship becomes more and more important. Okay, so that's busy open. Let's see, where are we? Flat and volume we talked about, right? On that first project where there's volumetric pieces and there's thin flat pieces. We talked about the this is volumetric, but if I take one off, that's very flat. Okay, that's the difference. Curved and straight is pretty obvious. Let's take a look at organic versus geometric, because that's interesting. So I'm going to add a page and all right, this is where projects become interesting to me, right? Because you can have like, that's an organic shape, but you can balance it with a geometric shape. And you can even, start to overlap things. Notice I put a rectangle in a corner. It doesn't do the same thing as a circle, right? Okay. What if I put a solid one? What was that do? That's too much. Okay, so that might not be a world-class design, but it's not bad because I just simply balance these things, right? I have a big organic shape over here, and then a big geometric shape over here. That's pretty easy to balance, right? I mean, they're fairly balanced. Then I put something that has a curved line, a circle here, and then I balanced it with this perhaps volumetric piece that's over on the other side. So it creates a sort of visual balance. And when you think about these things, you want to look at and maybe I wonder if there's a way to like turn these 90 degrees. Not sure. Format, no. But imagine looking at this being the bottom and this being the top. We want it to balance in all directions. 360 degrees as you walk around. It should balance all the way around. Okay. So let's go back to, let's stop the whiteboard. Are there any questions about the contrast that I want, the balance? The last thing was textured and smooth, and that's pretty self-explanatory also. So you can have a lot of little texture bits and pieces, and that one piece that has several layers of texture, those are important, but to contrast it with something smooth is equally important because you want this sort of balance. All right, let's stop sharing the whiteboard. Okay, so we need to get the drawing part, the sound exercise, and I'm only going to do, let's only do a couple tracks, but just in terms of sort of a system or an idea to get started, let me go over a couple of these And that way, you know, you can maybe we'll hit on something. And if you get off to like, if you can't think of anything, or if you get off to a rough start, maybe these are some ideas that you can kind of fall back on. Okay, so one of the things that I like to consider is, you know, pretty much everybody likes music, and pretty much everybody can make that visual connection between the things they listen to and looking and visualizing images, you know, visualizing like textures, right? Okay, so a lot of times, you know, it's a narrative thing where it's like, oh, like my neighbor plays banda music all the time, which I like, and his, you know, but when he plays it, I just think all these narratives come, you know, like I think of Mexico. I actually think of Germany because polka, there's similarities, you know, and I think of all these like things, but none of them are abstract shapes, right? All right, so here's the imaginary assignment that I would give to you. Say, for example, your favorite artist, whoever that may be, comes to you and says, hey, I need an album cover, right? Imagine that thing's 1 foot by 1 foot, and the artist says to you, okay, you can't have anything figurative in there. I don't want to give anything away, but I just want you to get the vibe right. I just want you to get the feel of the music right. And all you can do is use white foam board. You have to make an album cover for me that represents my music out of white on white. That's what I want, right? Okay, because that's what I'm asking you to do essentially, is to like take some sort of thought that's normally not 2D or 3D and put it down into a square. Okay. One thing, okay, I'll get to it after because it's going to break my train of thought. Okay. Another way you can go at this, just hypothetically, and you don't have to do it that way, you don't have to think about it, but if you have like a design in your mind already, then that's fine, right? You know, you can just start sketching away, and that's fine with me. So another way to do this is any of you that have had like a drawing class, you can do what's called a blind contour drawing, right? Okay, so blind contour drawing, the way I want you to do it, if you do it this way, if you're right-handed, you're going to do this drawing with your left hand, your offhand, right? And it's blind, so your eyes have to be closed. And it's a contour drawing because I want you to draw yourself, a self-portrait, right? There's the narrative in there. It's going to be you somewhere in there. And without looking, with your offhand, and with one line. In other words, you can't take the pencil off the paper, right? And you have to draw yourself, and you have to do it as faithfully as possible, okay? So every little blemish, every line in your face, you try to get it, right? If you need to do hairs, then somehow you do hairs. You know, that's up to you. So at the end, you know, I want, you know, you can get a piece of paper, you can cut out a square, and you can float that square over your drawing to the point where you think you've made an interesting, asymmetrical, non-figurative drawing, and start from there, right? Move it around so it feels right. You know, a lot of this is intuitive, and a lot of this, in fact, all of the projects, you're going to be using your intuitive, the things you already have in your head, the things you already know how to do, and you're going to, you know, articulate them into a project. My job is just to get like those thoughts correctly down on paper or in wire, etc. Right? So let's just do 3 tracks. What I want you to do is, if you have your sketchbook or a piece of paper, we're going to do 3 drawings. And the 3 drawings, you're going to try to use 1 full sheet of paper. All right. And I'll tell you the length of the track. So you'll have, I'll play the first one. It's about 5 minutes long. You'll have 5 minutes to make a composition, right? Now, I want these to be a composition, not just like a Rorschach test where you just have the pencil and you're like, oh, it's rock and roll. So it's just straight up and down, or, just like free association. I don't want it to be that like a bunch of scribbles in the center of your paper. I want you to compose this. Like if there's heavy bass sounds, maybe you signify that with a big volumetric block. That's a good idea. If it's like cymbals or something, maybe that's represented in smaller pieces. And lo and behold, in a composition, you'll have big pieces and small pieces. A lot of the things that happen in music also happen in design, right? It's a sort of harmony of different things, right? So in music, you have different instruments, and when you're doing this exercise, you can kind of signify, oh, this has a meandering sound. So maybe your design sort of like meanders around the paper. All right. So then after we do these drawings, we're going to use these drawings as a possible point of departure for your sketches, for your first project. Okay. Before we get to that, I want to like do the sound exercise quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to play these 3 tracks in succession, and you do the drawings, and I'll tell you how long they are. Does everybody understand? Okay, so let's. Okay, I believe this. Let's see, built-in internal speakers. All right, I want to make sure that you can hear this first. Wait, am I still? I hope I'm not sharing my screen. It's embarrassing. All right, so there it is. Okay, so this first one is 6 minutes long, and here's a hint. It's called Tiny Geometries, and so you have 6 minutes to come up with a composition, and write on your composition somewhere, just write Tiny Geometries. Okay, got it? You ready? Okay, here it comes. Hopefully. Wait, that's not it. Unbelievable. There it is. Okay, it starts off really soft. Can you guys hear it? Oh, good. Stop. No more. Okay, here's the next one. It's about 4 minutes long. Okay, you guys ready? Here's the next one.
Whether you're urban or outlandish,
A commercial.
modern or vintage, the redesigned styling.
Okay, here. This is called the apprehension engine. So think about that.
The 2020 Hyundai Elantra. Back.
All right, one more. This one's called, you can just call this one Brewster. Brewster, Brewster. Okay. Guys ready? Yeah. You're like, yeah, play it already.
Business owners worldwide already.
Okay, that's it for today. So I want you guys to first of all, the link is for the playlist. If you want to try more of these drawings and possibly like it might yield different results if you try different kinds of music with this exercise. The idea being that you create these non-figurative compositions for your sketches for your projects. Okay, quickly, I just want to show you on the whiteboard what the sketches should look like. What if they're all drawings? Okay, so so if this is a page on your in your sketchbook, then do like make your sketches, make them square so they're in the same ratio as your project, right? You're gonna start designing your project from these sketches. So make them, I'm making this as square as I can, sorry. So on one page, you could probably do 6 sketches. You know, if you want to do like 12 or 24 and make them thumbnail sketches, that's fine. But usually like 6 on a page, you know, it feels about right. So you can make them squarer than that, but don't make them like this, because your design, you might come up with a great design and then realize, oh, that's in a rectangle. That's not going to work for my project. So make sure you put them in, oh God, make sure you put them in square form, because that's how your project's going to be. Okay, so do a lot of these, and during the week, like starting in next week, you're free to go ahead and start working on your project. But what I'd like you to do before you start cutting foam is show me which design that you're leaning to. And that way you don't get off on some crazy tangent that won't work visually, or, you know, is kind of like messed up about the kind of formal criteria that I'm looking for. Okay, so that's it. Do you guys have any questions about what's happening this week? This week, focus on your sketches. Focus, I'll put up a new checklist for this week, and there's not 10 things on it, there's only 5 things on it. And get through the checklist by Sunday, and then, I think that's right. Get through the checklist on by Sunday, and then the following Monday, we'll start in on cutting foam, placing stuff, composing, and it's not long. Basically, once you get to that point, we're way past being half done, right? You have the idea, you're starting to like execute it. Then it's just a matter of like craftsmanship, and that's what we'll work on next week, okay? Okay, everybody have a good day. And again, if you have stuff missing from your checklists from last week, come into the lab either tonight or tomorrow morning from 10 to noon, and then that way we can get those taken care of. And if it's late, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as long as we kind of get through it. All right. All right. Have a good day. I'll see you guys next week. Welcome. You're welcome. 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 Bye.
See you next week.
Bye, Melissa. See ya. Bye, Alex. See ya.